of the things I love to do in these sessions is bring on interesting entrepreneurs who I've gotten to meet through my journeys that I think can be motivating, help you dream big, help you think about the similarities between how someone builds a massive private aviation companies and how those things apply to our businesses in real estate. Think bigger, pull parallels out of other industries. And so with that, I want to introduce Chris Bull here, who is the CEO of Northern Jets.
Thank you very much. Yeah, appreciate it.
And beyond just CEO, founder, basically built the company, owner, beyond just CEO. It's not some big company that he's plugged into. He built this thing. Because you've had some other interesting companies you've built and had exits, and I think just kind of sharing that background, and then we'll share some cool stories for everybody here in the room.
Robert, thank you very much for inviting me in today. It's a pleasure. I've met some of you outside. I thought I would just start off by, there's really nothing particularly special or unique about what I've done in my career so far. I always knew that I wasn't the brightest at school, but I always worked hard. And when I left school at 16, I was lucky enough to kind of ride some of the .com boom, and we started the first online media kind of advertising business in the UK. It was two good friends of mine who were about 6 years older than me that actually started the company. I left school and they said, hey, you need to come start buying and selling this ad inventory. We're basically brokers and we're buying it for $1,000 and we're selling it for $2,000. I'm like, that sounds pretty fun. And what is online ad inventory? Let's start with that. What the hell's that? It ended up selling, we sold it in 2008 to a Kansas City firm. So that was really my first interaction with doing business here in the US. Interesting enough, despite the accent, my mother is actually from Chattanooga, Tennessee. So I grew up U.S. mum, UK dad. So I was lucky enough to have that business, and I started one called Selective Media, which, funny enough, this building could use. We put Wi-Fi. We were the first meshed Wi-Fi network, citywide Wi-Fi network. So for those of you that have either been to London or seen it on TV, read telephone boxes, stereotypical, in most English movies, etc. We bought the rights to every single phone box in the UK. It was a payphone business that was going out of business. When the iPhone came out, it 3G at the time, took off, and people stopped putting pound coins into the payphone. And in reality, the business was going under. So the one thing it had going for it is it had fiber running in all the phone boxes. And one of the challenges we were having in the UK at that time is the 3G pipe was this big and we were trying to push this much data through it. So you'd be walking around London trying to use your new iPhone that had just come out and it wasn't working. So we created the first meshed Wi-Fi network in the world, which was London. And then we put it into the tube, the underground system, into every hotel, hospital, marina, airport, you name it in Europe. And it was a very interesting model because people thought it was an ad-funded model, right? And don't get me wrong, when you logged onto it, you watched a 15, 20-second ad, and that was a major revenue stream for us. But really, we were being paid by the providers, so in this case, the Verizons, the AT&Ts of the world, to offload those users onto our network as soon as the device hit that network. Sold that business in 2012 to a company called Arqiva, which is that's basically a digital infrastructure business behind Europe. And then we entered the private aviation space, which was actually by total fluke. When I sold the first company, I've always been fascinated with helicopters. I went out and bought a helicopter. So in the UK, I kind of got into the aviation world a little bit. And when I moved over here to the US in the beginning of 2012, I started a company called the Heli Team, which still exists today. We have grown that to be the largest helicopter ag utility business in the United States. So for those of you that have been around the Midwest in any capacity, we spray corn and beans, to put it simply. No matter what business I've ever had, and Northern Jet, obviously another business, we're the 13th largest jet business in the United States. We started that from scratch, albeit I did merge another business into us 2 years ago, which gave us the growth that to put us at kind of number 13, and hopefully higher this year, Dan, if we can get our stats out correctly, which would be great. And no matter what business I've ever been in, another random one, by the way, we own a company called Isolar. It's any of you on the West Coast, firefighting helicopters, when all the wildfires are going on, every single fire tank on those helicopters is produced by us worldwide. So we ship to China, Japan, New Zealand, Australia, South America, South Africa, etc. We bought that company in January. It's called Isolair, and we build spray equipment and firefighting equipment for the global helicopter market. Moved it. It was a big manufacturing facility, 50,000 square foot manufacturing facility in Oregon. Moved it to Orlando, which is where I'm based, by the way, and the hub of all of our businesses is out of Orlando, despite having locations across the country. All these businesses, despite they are in different industries and they have totally different customers, they're all run in the same manner, right? We focus on delivering exceptional customer service in everything we do, right? And it doesn't matter whether it was the technology business back in the day, whether it's Isolair, Northern Jet, or the heli team. The reason why we have been successful is two things. It's number one, complete dedication, right, to what we call our cause, right? And number two, it's the people, right? We've been very, very lucky over the years to attract some quality people who have joined our team and remained part of our team for many years. Northern Jet, right? So I owned a company called Speedbird, right? And I merged it with a company called Northern Jet Management almost 3 years ago. Northern Jet Management's been in business for 32 years. We're at 32 years technically, 30 years operating as a jet business, and we actually have our 30th year anniversary coming up. And one of the funny things is 2 of our employees that have been working for Northern Jet even worked for its parent company before that, and they've been with the company 40 years. So at our 30-year anniversary party on October 3rd, I'm going to be giving out 2 awards for 40 years with the company, which incidentally is longer than I've been alive. So that's going to be relatively amusing. But one of the things that you will find throughout all of our businesses is we've been able to keep our quality people, right? We do that by making sure that they're really aligned with our kind of company goals. From day one, we're very picky as to who we hire and who we bring onto our team. And we spend a long time, we spend just as much time on what we call our internal customer, which is our team, right, as we do on the external customer. Because in reality, the external customer and the success with that external customer comes from your internal customers. So when you talk about leading a team, growing a team, building a team, we really invest a huge amount of time in that. And what we've found is that by investing a lot of time and effort into our internal team, it produces results on the outside that we haven't even had to focus on.
This conference for us is really focused on growth. All of these folks have amazing real estate teams that they're very focused on growing. And so I guess let's kind of dig into your, that growth in the most recent businesses, kind of the growth of Speedbird, which was more organic. Organic 100%. Hiring of customers, organic going into new markets, organic acquiring new aircraft and, assets to manage, and then ultimately kind of culminating with that acquisition. And I think these are both strategies that our teams can use. We have teams that are mostly growing organically, but we have had teams acquire other teams and roll them in to build bigger businesses. So if you can just kind of take us through that growth arc. I mean, you took a passion project, a personal love for helicopters, and now 13th largest jet management company in the U.S. That's an amazing growth story. So let's kind of dig back on those early days of growth and let's start with the organic phase.
Sure, and actually it's interesting you mentioned organic. So everything we've done, at least in my working career, has been organic with the exception of that one merge between Speedbird and Northern Jet. And even Northern Jet, its growth has been 100% organic. As Dan sitting back here will tell you, it's very unique for a business like us, we spend almost no dollars on advertising. If you look at our competitors, if you look at the Wheels Up, the NetJets, the FlexJets of the world, their marketing budget, in particular, kind of advertising budgets, are huge. Dan doesn't really have a marketing budget, as he'll tell you, as much as he would like one. He doesn't have one. Our growth has been 100% organic, and how have we done that? It's word of mouth, right? So we rely on word of mouth from customer to customer. It's all customer referrals. One customer loves our service, their friend then signs up with us, their then 2 friends sign up with us, and it becomes an organic engine that, quite frankly, you have to work a little bit less hard, right? If I'm being totally honest with you, to maintain that from a salesperson standpoint. We have salespeople with us that have been with us two ladies in particular have been with us since they've been 21 years and 24 years, I think. If you ask them, they work hard, right? And don't get me wrong, there has been they've been grinding for years, but they're at the stage in their career now where they have this ecosystem of client base, right? I mean, they're doing 55, 60 million in revenue each, and they work, Dan, 10 hours a week, maybe, right? They are all very much part-time at this point, but they have spent years grinding, right? And, from an organic growth standpoint, acquiring that first set of customers, and having each one of our team members acquire that first set of customers, that's the hardest part. And honestly, it weeds out most people, right? I can tell you that we've tried to add additional salespeople to our team over the years, and that's one of the hardest. That's one of the biggest challenges that we face as a business. Is not that there isn't enough business out there. Is how do you hire the right people and get them trained up and really get them to use the technology around them, right, to help get that lead gen going, get those first 5, 10, 15 customers through the door, make sure they are looked after at the level that we expect them to be looked after, and then all of a sudden, here come the referrals. We've got one gentleman that's been with us now for about 1.5 years, and he's just now beginning to see that cycle. But I can tell you, it's taken us a long time to keep him motivated. It's tough, right? Especially when you're on individual, you're out there grinding. He is out there grinding. You got to remind, especially that generation, his generation, my generation, I guess, that you've really got to grind. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not going to happen in a week. It's not going to happen in 2 weeks. It's not going to happen in 6 months. This is a long-term business, but if you put the time and effort into it early on, you will reap the benefits, on the back end. Mary Beth and Stephanie are two top-performing sales. I mean, they've been with us over 20 years, and they're probably at this point in their 50s, Dan? 60s? In their 60s. Whereas our newest hire is probably 26, 27, and you can tell that he's getting frustrated. He's like, well, how are they able to do this? And I'm not. I'm like, well, they've been at it for a little bit longer than you have. They also know more than you, right? And it's very important to understand that. I think one area that I've been very lucky in my career so far is having the right, let's call them advisors around me. I've been able to tap into, and again, not in my industry at all. I've got a guy called Peter Wilson, who's one of my closest friends. He owns the Aston Martin, Jaguar, Land Rover dealerships in Orlando, right? He's actually also British. Been here since he was 25, 26 years old. He turned 70 today, albeit a very young 70. And he's been a huge influence in my career over here, in getting started, what to do. One of my biggest mistakes, which is an interesting one, which I hope none of you will, I don't think, have to go through this one. One of my most arrogant moments in life was thinking that I could move, having had 2 successful businesses at a very young age, thinking I could hop over the pond to the US, right? And thinking, let's just go do it all over again, right? In something else. We speak the same language, don't get me wrong, right? That's the only common play between the UK and the US. Doing business over here is completely different. And did I have my ass handed to me when I came over here for the first 3 years? Unbelievable, right? I had no idea what I was doing, and I thought I did, and I paid the price for it, which in reality was a great learning curve for me, and it set me up for where we are today, and obviously, hopefully, many years to come. From a growth standpoint, it's really everything we've done is organic, and it just comes down to building those customer relationships. We often look as a company, and we teach our salespeople, no matter how long they've been with us, we're always trying to think of out-the-box ideas, right, that helps bring that customer in, or an out-the-box idea that helps a salesperson perform. So we will put on very unique events, not large events by many cases. They're small, targeted events with the right people, bringing in the right assets at the right time, and we see a very high conversion rate. We in our industry do not see, and this might be different for you guys, but we don't see a lot of success when we have 300 people in a room, a load of planes, glitter and balloons, and don't get me wrong, everyone has a great time and it looks fantastic. We get absolutely zero out of it, and we've learned that over the years, right? Whereas doing very targeted, small, tailored events, which, sure, they cost us something, but really not a lot, right? For 15, 20 very qualified high net worth individuals in particular. We sell jet cards We sell fractional and we sell planes. So some of the planes we're selling are north of $50 million, right? 50 to 80 million bucks in many cases. So when you're targeting that type of audience, right, that you're not picking them up in a party of 300 people. We're putting on very tailored, dinners in the hangar for 10 unique individuals that maybe haven't met, that we thought they might quite enjoy getting to know each other because we have been able to create some common place between them. And then that builds that trust. And just so happens that the person that the target that we're looking to sell something to is sitting next to someone who has just bought from us, who's, has been with us for a long time, and all of a sudden they get comfortable because they've got, some natural referrals, and it just kind of, again, it just all organic growth on that front. And they like it, by the way. The customers, our customers, they don't want to go to another party at the Masters. They don't want to go to another party at a tennis. They don't want to be at the polo. And it's just, they get so many invites, that kind of stuff. That's not what they're looking to do. And it's always slightly surprised me that our competition hasn't woken up and realized that yet, as they continue to put on these huge events that in reality, in my opinion, don't bring a lot of value.
Yeah, so a couple of things, you guys. So you've got obviously the growth of the customer base, which, and again, we talk a lot about event marketing in these, in these sessions, and we have our events like this, and we teach our teams how to have their events to bring in prospects and agents that they want to bring into the team. You've got a couple different things that have to work together for growth, right? You've got the growth of the aircraft you manage, and then you've got the growth of maybe the clients who are then just going to jet card with you or charter with you. What does it look like on the aircraft growth side, and what were some of those early, again, some of the early acquisitions or early relationships to get those first aircraft into the fleet, so to say, and under management? What were some of those early obstacles and hills you had to climb?
Well, I think some of the earliest obstacles we had is we weren't one of the big names, right? We're not one of the top 5, and people hadn't heard of our brand. So it was really getting people comfortable with the brand and getting people comfortable with us as individuals and as a team. That was our biggest challenge. We overcame that by just building relationships. We turned our attention. There's no marketing in the world that we could ever, there's no dollar value we could throw at that that's going to fix the fact that we are not one of the top 5 in terms of brand names in our industry. So we just focused on relationships and how do we build that relationship with that one customer. And it's long. It's long, right? We're talking, I can tell you some of the early planes that are in our fleet, luckily, some of them are friends of mine, right? So that was a relatively easy one, but some of them weren't. Some of these took 2-3 years. I can tell you there's one just on a matter of principle that I've been after for 5 years that I haven't let anyone else own, and we're finally, getting him across the field to us end of this year. It's taken me 5 years to get that guy. Just building relationships, and again, not in your face building relationships, just nice and gentle, building the trust. Every now and again, saying, hey, look what we're doing, and I think so-and-so who has a plane with us, and again, just building that trust and relationship, and eventually they're looking and go, all right, I've heard enough great things about your organization, and there's been consistency there, right? That's the other thing. In our industry, a lot of people show up and exit, right? So you get a lot of these pop-up businesses and pop-up individuals within those businesses, right? Salespeople joining NetJet, salespeople joining FlexJet, salespeople joining Wheels Up or Fly Exclusive or any of my competitors. They don't typically stay there very long, okay? The longevity isn't there. Whereas with us, we have very little to no staff turnover at our business, which is very unique. And I think that the comfort level with customers when they see the same faces, they see the same names, and they're dealing with the same person now that first approached them 5 years ago, kind of does give them comfort that maybe this is a decent place to look at.
Yeah, so we talked about that yesterday with kind of this recruiting, psychology and how we have to have that longer game. We have to be consistent because there are a lot of pop-up, email you once and disappear, change companies all the times. Like this likability, right? What we talk about, you got to like them first, and that's exactly what Chris is saying. Like, hey, I got to get this person to like me. And then I got to stay consistent and stay in front of them. And again, I want you to think about this in the context of those higher value recruiting targets. We're going to spend time this afternoon talking about more of what I call the tonnage recruiting, which is we're going to get everybody we can. We're going to blast email. We're going to go to open house. We're going to hit just a lot of targets and find those ready to moves. But really, for me, it's about pushing you guys to focus more on those people who are comfortable today. They are making money where they are. They're not the quick yeses. We talked yesterday about using marketing recruiting to help drive that up, drive the likability, but it's this exact type of game. And so you have to understand that even from an event standpoint, Chris made a great point. There's the bigger events, the big 300 people in their world hanging out in a hangar, and that's where you're going to introduce a lot of those kind of broader targets. But then what are you doing to get the right top producers, the right potential sub-team leaders, the right potential mentors in your organization, which is more of that smaller event dinner, that smaller get to know you. Again, you building a personal relationship as the CEO, because you are the ultimate measure of consistency inside of those folks. The big takeaway I want for you guys, while we are talking a lot about that more tactical tonnage recruiting, is I want everyone to really think about how do you start to put that more strategic, high-value recruiting into your business if you're not doing it currently. How do you recruit those high-value targets, whether it's someone who's going to help you break into the luxury market in your area, someone who can run a sub-team in the market over, someone who can run a sub-team in a state over, someone who can be a replacement for you one day as the CEO, someone who can be a sales manager. These are those types of levels and individuals that we're talking about that have these parallels. So for you guys, I want to go back to that salesperson. So I think this is fascinating. So you've got the two ladies that are killers. Someone in one of our masterminds called them brunch Bettys. Was that you, Isaac? So in our world, we call that brunch Betty, because Betty just gets to go have brunch every day and do like $100 million a year in real estate sales, and it looks like she does nothing. And it's because brunch Betty's been selling real estate for 30 years, and everybody knows her. And in those markets, like, she's the killer. And so on the flip side, now you've got this salesperson in their 20s who's trying to grind it out and trying to get there. And I think we all can absolutely relate to that long sales cycle, getting someone in and getting them income producing. What are the activities you're guiding and teaching and training that person to do to go create opportunities, to go try to create these relationships so that one day he can be a brunch Betty and do $60 million a year working 10 hours a week? But what does it look like for him today?
So I think, technology in our world's a big play, right? Because if you're starting from scratch, which the gentleman who I was just referring to, he really did start from scratch a year and a half ago. So we have various technology that we use that will at least give them the leads that they need to get started. And ultimately, it is then about them building that relationship, right? They will, if they are a relationship builder, if they're not a relationship builder in our world, it doesn't work, right? And we can tell that pretty quick. In 6 to 9 months, we'll know whether someone has the ability. They might be the nicest person for us to deal with, but we will know whether they truly have the ability to build that relationship or not on a very authentic basis, which is what attracts our customers to us, is the kind of authentic side of the sales pitch. We do try and get them out to other sales, not necessarily on a one-on-one sales with another salesperson, but certainly if we're doing like a 4 or 5 person event, or I call it an event, it's really just like a meeting, but we always put on something for it. We'll try and get them down to that so they can listen, they can learn, we get them involved. It's not their customers, but they at least see it, right? They see it, they understand it, they can relate to it, and ultimately myself and Dan and others, we can judge whether they actually can relate to it or not. Because seeing someone pick up on the cues or not and miss the cues is really what tells us whether that person is going to be successful or not. It's a big investment for us. It's a little bit different, I think, on your guys' model, perhaps. But for us, it's a big investment to take a salesperson on. We invest a lot of time, effort, and money in that person. So we like to evaluate relatively quickly. And when I say quickly, we're talking a year to a year and a half, which in our world is quick, right? Long. Long, but that's quick in our world. We like to, by month 9 through 12, I want to know whether this person's going to produce or not. They might be great account managers, right? Once you have a steady stream of business and you need an account manager, they might be an account manager, but creating those relationships isn't going to be what they're strong in. So we've done that. We've converted some pretty successful people over to the account management side. But really, it's just it's grind. I mean, that's what it is. It's grind. I can tell you 2 or 3 of them right now that are just knocking out the calls, knocking out the emails, the texts, trying to create that common, contact that you might be able to have with that individual to at least start the conversation. And then ultimately in our world, again, it's about getting in front of them, right? Our close rate goes up drastically if we are able to get in front of the customer. If we can get the customer into one of our facilities to see a plane, whether they're buying jet card, fractional, or a plane, if we can get them into our door, our close rate is 90+%. But if you can get in front of them, it's about 55, 60%. Very rarely do we close over the phone. So really, we are trying to get in front of, the salespeople are trying to get in front of their customers. So it's a grind, no question. It's a lot of emails, a lot of phone calls, total dedication to building your pipeline. But some of them do it, some of them don't.
They don't have a Zillow. They don't have a Realtor.com. They can't go buy these leads. There's not people just trolling the internet like, hey, I want to engage with private aviation. And so when I look at it, I see a lot of the principles that we use as an industry 20 years ago, before we got the crutch of the internet, before we got the crutch of the easy IDX leads. And, so again, I want you to look at the parallels in your own business, like, what is value you can bring to your salespeople, right? And so a value they bring is these events. Like, hey, we're going to throw the events as the company, and that's going to create opportunities for our salespeople, for your agents to then go in and build leads outside of what you can buy online, outside of what you can drive through a Zillow or Realtor.com or whatever else. And then beyond that, it's a lot of the same things. They got to be likable. They got to do their follow-up. They got to stay in touch. I mean, there's just core sales is core sales, whether you're selling $80 million jets or $500,000 homes, and we have to have those right principles, and we have to keep our people motivated and moving forward. And on the flip side, Chris, it's interesting. I'd like to see you guys try some of the stuff we know works really well about how we do pre-position, how we build likability before we actually meet somebody, and maybe there's some crossover in the other direction. So.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, thinking about Zillow, it's quite funny. So we have one piece of technology in our industry, which I think will be our version of Zillow. It's called JetNet. And JetNet basically lists, it doesn't work for the jet card customer or the fractional customer to a certain extent, but it does work for the plane owner. So anyone that owns a plane is in a system called JetNet, and we can see when the plane was bought, how much it was bought for, if it's for sale, who's managing it, etc. So we do have a very similar system for aircraft ownership to Zillow. It's just not as readily available. What's interesting is sitting through your AI talk just now. I was sitting there with Dan. I'm like, man, there's a lot that we could learn from some of the stuff that you guys are doing, and I'm sure that some of the stuff that we're doing, to really build that customer relationship, could probably be cross-pollinated into your businesses as well.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of the other businesses. Actually, let's start with the heli team. So this is a fascinating business. You guys have this short season where you spray crops in the Midwest. What does that look like from a customer acquisition strategy and a salesperson strategy? And I know you've been at it long enough now. You just have all the farms, right?
Right. So how did we get that? I mean, that was me in a pickup truck going around. It really was. I mean, listen, I can tell you.
Door knocking.
I mean, it's a serious door knocking. The only difference between us and our competition and why we were able to scale so quickly. So I get asked a lot at our industry events, of which we have 2 a year, from our competition, like, how have you managed to scale this business to where you are today? I've been at it for 30 years, and I'm, a fraction of the size, and it's quite interesting. I only made one change to the business model. Outside of making sure we deliver exceptional customer service, etc., all of our competition, which has been around for 50-plus years, they were selling to farmers, right? Now, just to put that into perspective, the average family farm in the Midwest is about 800 to 1,100 acres, okay? We just finished spraying 675,000 acres in 8 weeks. So if I had to go sell and then collect checks from every individual farmer, the business would just be it wouldn't be scalable, right? So I looked at it and went, right, how could I acquire a shitload of these farmers, right? Once, right? How can I go sell to one and get 50 of them? So we're spraying product, right? We're spraying fungicide, insecticide, nutritionals, etc. Who's supplying that to them, right? And well, there are a handful of large retailers out there that I realized was supplying everything other than the aerial application portion. So I bypassed the customer, went straight to the retailer, which, by the way, is now a B2B sell versus B2C, which is significantly easier when you're trying to scale that business. And we sold to the retailers, right? Now, ultimately, what ended up happening is we then, through the retailer, built the relationship with the customer, right? So now I've got a B2B relationship. I have protected myself by having those customer relationships, right? and they like to know, we're a major part of their yield production in a year. So we are probably 30% of their total yield for the year. So if we screw it up, right, we cost them a lot of money. So therefore, they're very sensitive to the quality of the application. Therefore, we have built a relationship with each grower pretty much directly. But that's how we, how did we initially scale that business? It was me going out and meeting with each one of these retail locations, of which I don't know how many we have now. We probably have 50, 60 of them, as we sit today. And they eventually, I had a great relationship with this one, and this one's friends with the guy 20 miles down the road who runs that one, who introduced me to them, and then I'd go sell to them. And again, it's still organic growth, and it's 100% word of mouth, but it was, in the early days, very much me going in a truck and meeting with these people, and as my wife will tell you, which is interesting enough how, I don't know if you know this or not, this is how we got into the aviation space in the first place. So we are based, the heli team is based out of a place called Jacksonville, Illinois, which I guarantee none of you would have a clue where that is. It is in the middle of nowhere in Illinois, just west, about 20 minutes west of Springfield, and it's impossible to get to, right? The closest airport is St. Louis, which is a 2-hour, 20-minute drive from our house. And I was commuting, right, a lot in the early days of the heli team to go sell, not just sell, but I was doing the sales, I was doing the management, I was doing everything, right? And I would spend my whole time going to and from, and it was a huge pain in the ass because I would get stuck at MCO. I've got to be at MCO 2 hours before, and then the flight would get delayed. It would take me a whole day to get to our place in Illinois to go do a series of 4 meetings to then spend a whole day traveling back. And when my wife and I decided to have kids, I was like, this is going to be a little bit of a snafu because this isn't going to go down so well when I'm gone as much as I was gone. So I said to my wife, I've got a great idea. Let's buy a plane. And she was viciously against it. So we bought a King Air, which was our first ever plane, and I used it to get to and from. So now I could go from here to we have an airport 2 miles, a tiny little strip, 2 miles behind our house and our property there. So it changed the game. It allowed me to go up there, 2 hours, 45 minutes, door to door, right, do my meetings, and I could be back the same day. When we bought it, I sold my wife on the fact that I would add it to our charter certificate and generate some income with it to help pay for this plane. So we did that. Friends found out we had it. It was then flying 1,000 hours a year, which is a lot. And it was never available for us when we needed it. So we said, oh, shit. So we better buy another one.
I have to buy another one.
Yeah,
yes.
so we bought another one, and then I got really wild and talked my wife into saying, hey, I think we're going to buy our first jet. And she was viciously against that. But we bought our first jet, and now we got 52 of them in the fleet.
And then he said, we're going to buy a jet company next.
Yes,
know?
which she was also viciously against. Yeah. And she'll tell you, I think probably to this day, Dan knows. Dan works with her day in, day out. I mean, listen, one of my biggest, reasons for success, honestly, over here and what we're doing is her. She's been a huge rock for me over the years, and she works in all of our businesses. So she is heavily involved in Isolair, the heli team, and Northern Jet. Albeit less Northern Jet now than previously. I've really given her Isolair, and she's now actually kind of running with Isolair, which is the tank manufacturing business. None of it would have been, very lucky to have her around because she's been instrumental in helping me get them all up and running.
So 52 aircraft, what is that? Maybe 150, 200 pilots total? Well, how many pilots do you guys have?
So we're 300 people, of which 200 are pilots.
So what does that recruiting process look like? Is pilot recruitment as simple as throw an ad on Indeed, or are you like targeting the pilots and building relationship and working them over time? Like, talk to me through how you acquire 200 pilots.
Really, really interesting. And actually, if you talk about one of our biggest challenges over the last 4 years, has been exactly that. So, bit of backstory for you. Prior to COVID, and I'm going to put this in a manner that we can all understand. Prior to COVID, right? A pilot would walk into our office with their resume and say, hey, what can I do to work for you, right? And we'd look at their resume and work out whether, we want to invite them in for an interview. That was 2019. In 2021 and 2022, the airlines furloughed thousands of pilots, right? And they retired. Here's the big one. They retired thousands of pilots. And all of a sudden, we snap out of COVID, and they go, oh, shit, we don't have enough pilots, right? So they start pulling pilots from everywhere. So we went from an oversupply to an undersupply in 12 months, And those same pilots that were coming in our door asking, what can I do to work for you, right, are now coming in our door, if we're lucky enough for them to come through our door in the first place, right? You have to fight to get them through your door. Then they sit in front of you and say, what are you offering me? It's like, oh, that's changed a bit. So we've had to really adapt big time to how we recruit, how we attract, recruit, and retain our pilots. And one of our kind of proudest statistics is we have one of the highest retention rates of anyone in our industry when it comes to pilots, which over the last 5 years have been the highest churn rate we've seen in our industry as far back as data will go.
So what does that department look like? Is there a whole team recruiting pilots? Like, let's go, because I think this is really applicable for our guys. Like,
right.
We need 200 agents the way you need 200 pilots, and agents go through waves where they're harder to get, easier to get. So what does that process look like?
Okay, so that process starts with acquiring, the lead. So whether it's an inbound lead, hey, I'm interested in joining your company, or we go to a lot of events. So we have a recruitment team, right? We got a whole team that sits behind the recruiting arm that goes to industry events to recruit pilots. And we're selling ourselves, that's what we are. We're selling ourselves to pilots. And we have a very, from our standpoint, big regulatory piece, right, that sits behind our hiring. So it's one thing to say, yes, I like this person. They're going to be a good fit for the company. They have the qualifications. We like them. It's then a whole nother step for us. Can we actually get them qualified, right? Are they going to meet our regulatory requirements? We could really like someone, and then we put them in an aircraft, and they just have no idea what they're doing, right?
That's a struggle.
That's
not good.
That's a challenge, right?
Likability's not getting us past that one.
Exactly. So we have a whole, what's called a sim check session. So we have a recruiting team that starts over the phone. Hey, they vet the person, and quite frankly, the person's vetting us, right? So it's like a two-way sales pitch. And then once we say yes, and we have a whole, it would actually be quite interesting to show you, but we have an entire kind of end-to-end recruiting platform, right, that monitors at each stage how and where these people come in, where they drop out, why do they drop out, did we push them out, right? And we kind of trend, and we change our offer, we change our talking points, we change our direction quite rapidly to account for changing needs. There are a lot of external influences in our world that can change our recruiting from Monday to Friday, right? Great example, as we sit here right now, we don't need any pilots. So recruiting is very easy. I've got a whole team that we're trying to work out what to do with right now because we don't need, now, Delta and American Airlines have just announced they're going to turn hiring back on again. The minute that announcement came out, big meeting, recruiting team, right, they're going to come after our crew. We know they will, right? They've done it before, they're going to do it again. They've worked out that we're a great poaching ground because we breed quality pilots. So we immediately go into, right, what do we got to do to stop this from happening, right, before it happens? So that was 2 weeks ago, right? And then 10 days ago, Spirit says, hey, we're looking a bit shaky. We might not make it. We think we're not going to make it for the next 12 months. That would be 2,400 pilots laid off. Woo. All right, hang on, pivot to this other direction. All of a sudden, let's start going after Spirit pilots because all of a sudden, Spirit pilots have just been told that their job may not be there in 12 months. So we're going to go see how many of those quality candidates can we pick up. So we're constantly watching the market. We're interacting with potential candidates the whole time. From a process standpoint, it would be interesting for you to see the technology, for sure.
Yeah, we'd love to see that.
Because it really does track what works and what doesn't work.
Is that something proprietary you guys built?
We built it in-house.
Again, the tech backgrounds, building England's first tech platforms and marketing platforms, and I'd love to look at that and, kind of understand, because we're looking to build some similar stuff for them.
It's been very successful, and actually, before we had it, it was a bit of a disaster. We fell down quite drastically on the recruiting front when it first started happening because we were growing, right? We were growing at the same time as the pilot market was depleting. So that was a kind of double hit for us. And the technology we have in place today and the process, a really well-defined process that we put in place with quality people leading that process, right? That's really what set us up for success. On the pilot recruiting front anyway. As we went through our merge, couple years, 3 years ago, there were times when we needed to hire 80 plus pilots. We knew we had a pipeline of 80 pilots. I mean, that's a lot, right? That's a lot of pilots to be attracting, and it's from saying yes to hiring them to actually having them fly the line is about 9 months. Really long and very expensive, for us, very expensive to acquire a pilot. So for us, it's all about how do we retain that crew member once we get them on board. What can we do to make their life easier? What can we do to make their life better? And it's not always, financial. A lot of times it's not financial. It's quality of life, right? So we put a lot of practices in place that improve the quality of our crew members' life. And honestly, not just crew member. That's a Northern Jet, that's a heli team, that's an Isolair. That's been something that we've been big on for a long time. It's just how can we improve the quality of life of anyone that works for us? So we spend a lot of time on that.
Awesome. All right, let's take a couple questions from you guys, and then we're going to get on to our next thing. Really appreciate your time, man.
Where would you rank recruiting, and do you ever stop recruiting? But where would you rank it in your levels of importance?
That's great. So we never stop recruiting. We never stop recruiting. We know that our industry runs in cycles. You can't stop recruiting because your pipeline can never be empty. Now, you may start reducing the number of applicants that you're accepting, right? But your pipeline is staying the same at any moment in time. So great example, when I just said that Delta and American Airlines are looking at hiring again, our team immediately just turned on, okay, right, who have we got in our pipeline? All these people are vetted. We know them. We've done our background. Let's jump in and go chat to them and see if we can get them on board. What you don't want to do is ever turn that off, because to get to that point is, that could be a year to get yourself to the point where you've got that constant flow of individuals coming through. And by the way, nothing stops me from saying, you know what, we're going to add 6 to 10 planes. That's 4 to 6 crew members per plane. And if I add 4 of them, hey guys, I need you to staff these now, right? And they need to be able to go to market and make it happen with pre-qualified candidates off the bat. So we never stop that process.
Can you talk more specifically to how you help your people's quality of life and how that lends toward retention?
Sure. I would say we're a very thoughtful business, right? We spend a lot of time really understanding the people that work for us, okay? And it's a fine line, right? In our world, we're quite a corporate entity. Heli Team is not, just to be clear. Heli Team is about as uncorporate as you could possibly get, right? It's wild, right? I mean, I know their wives, I know their kids. It's just a wild side of life, as is Isolair to a certain extent. Northern Jet's very corporate, so it's a fine balancing act between knowing enough about the individuals that work for you to be able to make decisions or help them when they might not know that they need help, right? Great example. If I have someone, this is a live example, I have someone who's been going through a really difficult divorce. He's been with me a long time. He's been with me for probably 13 years at this point. If you didn't know, he hasn't brought it into the office with him. He hasn't brought it to other team members. Like, you really wouldn't know. But we've looked at that and went, okay, what can we do that could help that? Like, I can see it. Other people that really know him well can see it. So we just, we will go out of our way to try and help them. It could be kid-orientated. It could be, spouse-orientated. It could be a certain circumstance, whether it's financial or otherwise. We're just always trying to be aware of, what's going on in their life and what can we do to improve. Corporate level, right? Benefits. In our world, constantly reviewing our benefits. What can we bring to the table? And I'll tell you what shocked me. This is crazy, right? Which goes to show that I'm out the loop a little bit on this one. We send out a benefits survey to 300 plus employees every year, and our head of HR, who is absolutely fantastic, she came to me and said, "Do you know what one of the highest asks is on our survey?" I said, "No, I've got no idea." He goes, "Animal health care." I said, "Do what?" He goes, "Pet healthcare." I said, "What do you mean pet healthcare?" She goes, "For their cats and their dogs." And I said, "No, you must have read that wrong, surely. That can't be on the top 10. And it is. Because if you look at the generation of pilot that we have working for us, a lot of them, if you step back and look, they don't have kids, okay? And they don't have kids at a young age like some of us did, or some of us do, right? And their kids are the dogs, the cats, the hamsters, the gerbils, and everything else that comes with it, right? And what is very important to them is healthcare for their children, which just happen to be animals. So I went, all right, add it to the list, I guess. So do you know what I mean? We're constantly making changes like that, and just listening to our people is really important, right? And I think that's something which I have learned from an early age is no matter what you're doing in business, right, you have to listen. Whether it's a customer, whether it's an employee, like you've got to listen and take in and be aware of them, their surroundings. And if you do, you'll pick up on things that perhaps others that just talk listen, if we're in sales can be a very talky, you've got to listen.
When you Delta and coming in to attack your pilots, when you model that out, how much are you thinking we're going to lose at least 20 or 30, so we need to bring in 20 or 30 new, versus how much of it is let's try to keep everybody? Like how much of your strategy is, obviously you want to retain, but how much are you saying, hey, I know this means I'm going to lose X, so I need to backfill those X, versus I'm going to fight tooth and nail to keep X? How do you think about that?
We overstaff. We deliberately overstaff at all times to account for the unexpected. Our turnover rate is kind of less than, what was it, about 11%? Yeah, about 11% for the last 12 months, which sounds high, but that's in our industry. Most people are sitting at kind of 30%.
Yeah, our industry runs 30, 40.
Yeah, I was going to say 30 to 40%. We're down at 11, which is unheard of. But we do overstaff for that 11 because, again, for us, if I'm short of a pilot, right, the plane doesn't take off, which is a bit of a snafu as well when you're trying to run a jet business. So we budget and account to be overstaffed at a certain level, and we are constantly hiring to make sure that we stay at that level. So we protect ourselves against that. What we can't account for and what we don't account for in our routine numbers is someone coming in and taking a group. But in reality, that very rarely happens. It's normally a bit of a wave, and we can see that coming and turn it up. But we always overstaff to account for some level of unexpected departure. And by the way, in our case, it's not just departure, it's health, right? Pilots have medicals. They have licenses. Something could happen to them. They might have to now be on a certain type of medication, and they could fly yesterday, they can't today, right? So we're always having to account for that.
Chris, I'm sitting here and I'm fascinated by the totality of your career trajectory. You've had success in vastly different sectors. That lens of opportunity seems to be your common denominator. What's that? Is that something that's taught?
It's interesting. I think I'm going to take that and spin it a little bit, okay? What all these businesses do is they solve for a problem. I like to think I've been a good problem solver from a very young age, right? And was it taught? Yeah, it probably was, right? Probably led by, I learned a lot around me as a young age. But in reality, every one of these businesses solves a problem in our industry. A lot of businesses in all these sectors, in particular in the technology space, right? If your business is reliant on technology, you have to be at the forefront of that technology at all times, or you get left behind. So being able to be aware and pivot and be agile enough, and it doesn't necessarily, the bigger you get, right, the harder it can be to remain agile. So and Northern Jet is the largest business that I have ever owned and run. And something that we put a lot of time and effort into is how do we remain agile? And we speak about this in our leadership sessions on a regular basis. How do we structure our business and build our business to remain agile? If we have to pivot because of external factors that we didn't see coming, or a market trend, how do we keep ourselves keep ourselves nimble? And we've had to do that across all these businesses over the years. Stay nimble, look for opportunity, and ultimately try and solve a problem. And if you can, it wins.
I love that. Big round of applause for Chris.
Amazing. Thank you, buddy.